Before our story begins, before the stars rise and the hearth glows, I invite you to settle in. Let the day fall behind you now. Let the thoughts soften. Close your eyes if you wish, or simply let them grow heavy. You are safe, you are warm, and you are exactly where you need to be. Take a long, deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, just like that. Again, breathe in gently, as if inhaling the scent of fresh-baked bread, and exhale slowly, as if blowing across the surface of a warm drink. Feel your chest rise and fall. And with every fall, let your body melt just a little more into the place where you rest. Let your jaw loosen. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands grow still. And now, with the rhythm of your breath, like a tide, let us begin our story. Our story sets sail on a soft and star-dusted night in a village so small it was often left off the maps. Nestled between two sleepy hills and curled beside a silver stream, this village slumbered peacefully beneath the vast medieval sky. There were no lanterns left burning here. No carts creaked through the streets. Only the wind, drifting like lace through crooked chimneys, brushing over thatched rooftops, and rustling gently through linen, drying on lines strung tight. But in one corner of the village, just past the cobbled square and the old wooden well, a soft amber glow blinked to life. It came from a single round window in the back wall of a bakery, one of stone and timber, its chimney already sighing warm puffs into the cool air. Inside, the oven hummed with yesterday's heat. The wooden work table was dusted with flour-like snow that had never melted, and beside it stood a man of quiet habit and soft hands, the baker. His name was Corin, but the village children called him Starbread, because while other bakers rose with the rooster's crow, Corin rose before the stars had even begun to fade. He didn't mind the darkness. In fact, he preferred it. The quiet, the slow hours. The way moonlight cast soft silver shadows on rising dough, while others dreamed Corin needed. And sometimes, as he pressed his palms deep into the soft living flour, he'd glance upward through the round window and whisper the names of stars. Vega, Altair, Deneb. He knew them all. Not from books, but from bread. 'Cause Corin, like some in the old country ways, believed that stars could shape a loaf. That when the moon hung full, yeast would rise faster. That constellations left invisible patterns on crust. And that bread made under Orion never crumbled in the hand. Is it true, perhaps? But the villagers never questioned it. Because Corin's bread is always perfect. Soft, warm. A crust that sang when tapped, center like folded clouds. And always pressed deep into each loaf was a small mark. A symbol. A medieval bread stamp, carved from cherry wood. Each family had their own, some shaped like a cross, some like vines, others like animals or letters. But Corin's was different. His stamp was a star. Let your breath follow the rhythm of kneading. Push, fold, rest, push, fold, rest. Inhale with the press. Exhale with the fold. Stillness in the pause. Even your breath now rises like warm dough. The baker moves slowly, but with the confidence of someone who has done this 1,000 times and still loves every press of it. The flour floated in the air, turning golden in the flicker of the hearth. The wood crackled softly behind him. The stone oven exhaled warmth in quiet gusts. And above, the stars watched as they always had. Outside, the village remained asleep, not a single candle lit. Not a rooster dared stir. But here in the soft-breathed bakery, bread was becoming. And with every stretch and tuck, Corin whispered stories to the dough. Old tales. Of moonlight that once turned wheat fields silver. Of sailors who navigated by yeast and sky. How his grandmother once baked a loaf that rose during an eclipse and never spoiled, not once. He told these stories not aloud, but in breath, in movement, in memory. And somehow the dough always understood. The oven was old, older than the village, some said. Built of thick river stones and crowned with a soot-darkened arch. It didn't roar like other hearths. It sighed. And Corin swore that when you fed it the right kindling, elm would dip in morning dew. A faint glow appeared behind the coals, blue like starlight, as if the fire was remembering something. Tonight he used just such wood. The oven purred. Its warmth reached not only his hands, but the very air around him, turning the cool dawn into something between dream and memory. Each loaf, shaped gently, was placed with care onto the stone peel, its underside dusted with bran, its top brushed with whisper-thin cream. And before it entered the fire, Corin did one last thing. He stamped it, firmly, centrally, with his carved cherrywood star. Let your breath follow that press, the brief pause, the quiet thump. The symbol meets dough, like sealing a secret inside. It's like tucking in a wish before sleep. No two stars were ever exactly the same. The dough rose differently each night, sometimes full like the moon, sometimes thin as a crescent, sometimes cracked like starlight on water. But always, each one carried the mark. It's not just the symbol, but the quiet, the piece of bread born at night in silence, by hands that knew gentleness as a craft. The village didn't know these details. They only knew that each morning when the sky turned milk gray and the first crow sounded, the bakery window creaked open, and in its sill sat a basket woven tight, lined with cloth filled with loaves still warm from the oven's breath. Children would race barefoot to be first. Old women would press their hands against the basket's sides just to feel the heat. And every so often, someone would lift a loaf, see the star press deep, and smile. Because even without knowing why, they could feel that something about this bread had dreamt while it was made. Tonight, as Corin watches the loaves brown slowly in the dim firelight, he leans back, presses floury palms together, and listens. Not to the crackle, not to the hiss, but to something deeper. A tone that seems to come from the walls, from the coals, from within the rise of each loaf. It's not music, it's not speech. It's the sound of a night that knows it has done its work well. Breathe in gently, feel the warmth, smell the bread, the sweetness of grains, the softest hint of wood smoke, the echo of sleep, and exhale. You are resting now in a bakery that remembers the stars. He doesn't bake for money, not anymore. Doesn't measure ingredients or chase perfect rise. He simply listens. To the stars, to the oven, to the breath of the dough. And when the loaves are ready, he lifts them one by one and places them near the window, wrapped in linen, quiet as moonlight. He doesn't ring a bell, he doesn't call. And yet each morning, the basket is always empty by the time the sun rises. It's enough to know the bread found its way to the right hands. That someone, somewhere, sliced into the loaf with a still drowsy smile and tasted not just flour, but starlight. Outside the oven now, steam curls from each finished round. Corin wipes the table, brushes flour from his sleeves. Then at last he sits, back resting against warm stone, hands folded, eyes on the round window above, where the last of the stars begin to fade into morning blue. He doesn't need sleep, not yet, because something inside him has already dreamt. And the dream was baked into every loaf. Not all flour is the same. Some comes from golden fields cut by scythes in the heat of day. Some from mills beside roaring rivers. Some ground fine by hand with heavy stones and kept in quiet cellars. But in a little pouch beneath Corin's work table, wrapped in waxed cloth and tied with twine, was a bag unlike the rest. He called it moonflower. It wasn't truly from the moon, of course, but it was milled only at night by an old friend of Corin's who ran the windmill atop Far Hollow Hill, only during the waxing moon. And never under sunlight, he'd grind the grains in stillness as owls drifted through the rafters. The flour came out pale, nearly white as snow, and softer to the touch than wool. Corin used it rarely, only when the sky called for it, and tonight the sky did. He loosened the pouch gently, as if waking something fragile. The flour inside shimmered faintly in the oven's warm glow. He scooped a handful, inhaled the cool scent, and whispered a thank you to the wind that had turned the mill. Because in Corin's world, every ingredient was a gift. Gifts were never taken silently. With the moonflower, he made smaller loaves round, like coins, light like clouds. Scored in a spiral that mirrored the stars above, he called them wish rolls, and they were never sold. It's only left in hidden places. On doorsteps, in baskets, by the window of the sick or sorrowful. No one ever saw him deliver them. But everyone knew when a wish roll had arrived, because their dreams that night always felt warmer. Breathe in slowly. Let the scent of moonflower fill your thoughts. Cool. Pure. Silent. Exhale. And let go of anything that no longer rises with you. As he shaped the little loaves, he thought of his grandmother, the one who taught him to listen to the sound bread makes as it rests. It hums, she once whispered, cupping a fresh loaf to her ear, just like the stars. She'd been the first to tell him that bread could carry wishes, not through magic, but memory. And sometimes, rarely but truly, it would carry a piece of that listening to someone who needed it most. That was why Corin baked, not for food, not for praise, but because he believed that every person deserved to be heard, even if they could never say a word. And bread, in its silent warmth, had always been a good listener. The wish rolls rose quietly beside the oven. Their spiral cuts opened just slightly. Like sleepy eyes, Corin, tired now but full in the heart, placed them into a smaller basket lined with wool. He would deliver them soon. No need to wait, 'cause when you've listened carefully, you already know where warmth is most needed. Outside. The horizon blushed with the first strokes of pale gold. But for now, the sky still held one final star, flickering, faithful, unseen by most. But Corin saw it, and he smiled. Let your breath match the rise of the wish rolls. Inhale. Let yourself expand like warm dough. Exhale. Settle into the shape of rest. Feel the soft truth. You don't need to be perfect to be enough. You only need to rise gently. The stars were almost gone now, washed from the sky by a pale watercolor of morning, but Corin was still moving, quiet as mist, basket of wish rolls in hand. He wore a long wool cloak, smelling faintly of flower and rosemary, its hem brushing the cobbled street like a cat's tail. His boots made no sound, not because they were silent, but because the village listened kindly. To anyone who walked without wanting to be heard, house by house, he left his loaves. A widow's stoop, a shuttered window where a sick child slept. The small chapel where Father Mead lit the first candle of morning. He didn't knock, didn't leave notes, just placed each roll as gently as if laying down a sleeping bird, and moved on. He passed the inn, its windows still dark, save for one flickering hearth. He paused there. For inside that inn, beneath its thatched eaves and timber beams, a traveler had arrived late last night, weary. With eyes like clouds and boots like stories, Corin had seen him from the bakery window. And not many came to the village anymore. It sat between places rather than within them. But sometimes people found it when they didn't know where else to go. He tucked a wish roll beside the inn's doorframe, pressed it there like a blessing. It's not for a journey's end, but for rest before the next road began. Then, with the basket empty and the light softly blooming, Corin turned back toward his bakery. The sun was just beginning to stretch its arms over the eastern hill. Let your breath stretch too. A long inhale, slow and full, and a gentle exhale, like lowering a lantern at dawn. The village would begin to stir soon. Mothers warming milk, fathers rubbing their eyes, boots thudding the floor, children yawning wide, blankets tangled around their feet. And somewhere among them, someone would find a small round loaf marked with a spiral. They'd hold it close, inhale its quiet sweetness. And for just a moment, they'd feel seen. That was Corin's gift. It's not just bread, but presence. He gave his village the feeling of being remembered, even when forgotten by the world. And in return, the village gave him what he most treasured: stillness. Back in the bakery, he opened the small wooden hatch behind the oven, a passage known only to him, leading to a round stone room, half hidden beneath the hill. He called it the resting hearth. No flour here, no tools, just blankets and a chair shaped by time. It was here he came to sleep, not long, but deep. Aglow. He hung his cloak on a peg, poured water from a clay jug, sipped, then sat, let the warmth from above reach down through the stones and settle on his shoulders like a shawl. He closed his eyes, not because he was tired, but because the day was ready to hold itself. And the baker who dreamed of stars and listened to loaves let go. Let your breath soften with his now. Inhale, as if tucking in a fresh loaf. Exhale, as if blowing out the last candle of night. Inhale, full of quiet. Exhale, empty of weight. You are not alone in this stillness. The baker walks beside you. His hands know the rhythm of rest. His dreams are already warm. Long before Corin was born, before the star was carved into his bread stamp, his family had passed down a secret, not written in ink, but pressed into dough, a language of symbols. Bakers in olden times did more than mark their loaves for ownership. They told stories, offered blessings, carried meaning. Some stamps meant peace. Others whispered return home safe. A few were even warnings, subtle signs of bad grain or long fasting days. And Corin's family had always chosen the star. It was his grandmother's stamp first, its points uneven from use, softened by time and touch. She used it sparingly, only when the night sky was clear and the winds came from the north, because she believed, as many in the village did, that true meaning only held when the earth and sky were in harmony. And bread, being both born of ground and baked in fire, was the perfect vessel to carry such messages. As a boy, Corin had watched her hands move, the way she turned the stamp gently, just before the bread was ready, not rushed, never careless. She would whisper something, not a prayer, not a word, just a breath of thought, and press, and Corin, even then, understood. This was not cooking. This was a kind of quiet magic, the kind that needed no spells, just flour and heat and a heart open to listening. So when he was old enough, she gave him the star stamp. She held it out, wrapped in linen, her eyes soft with sleep and years. "This isn't yours," she said. "It belongs to whoever you feed. You're just the hands." And from that day on, Corin never made a single loaf without its mark. Even now, all these years later, he could feel the grooves in the wood like the lines in his own palms. He'd made copies, of course, in case the original wore down, but none felt quite the same. None hummed when touched. Yes, hummed, not aloud, but deep in the fingertips. A kind of knowing. The stamp lived in a small drawer beneath the work table, wrapped still in the same cloth. And every evening, just after mixing the final batch, he would open the drawer, touch the linen, and wait. Some nights the cloth stayed cool. Other nights, like tonight, it felt faintly warm, like bread before it browns. That's when he knew. The stars were listening. Let your breath rise, as if kneading dough beneath your palms. Push, fold, pause, push, fold, pause, and let the gentle rhythm rock you deeper into stillness. Outside, the village had fully woken. Chickens clucked, water pails clanged on hooks. A few carts rolled through the dirt roads, wheels creaking in slow circles. But inside the bakery, it was still quiet. Not because it was empty, but because it was full of waiting. Corin stood once more at his table. Today was market day. He'd bake extra loaves, not just for hunger, but for gathering. For neighbors, for stories shared over slices, for laughter. He prepared the stamps carefully. The star, yes, but also others, some older than memory. A wheat sheaf for abundance. A crescent moon for safe travels, a tree for family growth. He would use them all today, because today wasn't just for bread. It was for marking lives. As he stamped each loaf, he thought of those who'd received them. Old Merrill, who had lost her husband last harvest. She'd get a tree for roots that still hold. Young Garin, off to join a carpenter's guild. He'd get the crescent for return. A new couple, recently wed. They'd get a double star pressed side by side. Corin never told anyone the meanings. He never needed to. The bread spoke quietly to those who were meant to hear it. Some noticed, some didn't, but all felt something. And as the first loaves entered the oven, as steam rose and crusts began to form, the symbols remained visible until they didn't. For some baked in fully, others cracked. Some vanished completely. But the message, it always stayed. In memory, in dreams, out. Let your thoughts grow soft like rising dough. Let the meaning soak into you without needing to be understood, because not all messages need reading. Some just need warmth, time, and rest. The village square was just beginning to stir, dust rising in beams of gold as wheels thumped over stone and baskets bumped softly against hips. On the far end of the square stood a short wooden frame, 2 worn posts, joined by an iron hook. And from that hook hung a small bronze bell. It didn't chime for time, nor for warnings. It rang for bread, a tradition older than anyone could name. When the baker was ready, he'd pull the rope once, twice, thrice, and the market day would begin. Corin stood at the edge of the square now, the sun just touching his face. In one hand he held a basket of marked loaves, in the other his grandmother's bell rope coiled like a memory. He closed his eyes, let the scent of rosemary and rising yeast drift with the morning. Then softly, almost reverently, he rang the bell 1, 2, 3. The sound was warm, full. It hung in the air like mist over a field. And from every corner of the village doors opened, not rushed, not chaotic, but calm, like the unfolding of petals. People came not just with coins, but with trades, cloth scraps, carved spoons, honeycomb, and milk, because Corin's bread had never been about money. It had always been about offering. An offering in this village was never small. As villagers approached, they'd pause before selecting a loaf. They'd glance at the mark. Some would smile. Some would quietly trade it for another. It's not because they disliked it, but because something in their heart said, that one is meant for me. And Corin said nothing, just nodded softly when someone met his eye. Because in the silence, everything that mattered had already been said. There was Etta, who'd once lost her hearing in a fire, but never missed the bell. She held a loaf with a moon mark to her chest, as if listening through her heartbeat instead. There was Ronan, who always arrived late, but never took the last loaf. He'd whisper a thanks to the empty basket, leave behind a carved acorn, and walk home barefoot. And there was the traveler, the one from the inn, stood back for a long time, watching the way the villagers touched the loaves, how their faces softened even before the bread touched their lips. At last, he stepped forward. There were only 2 loaves left, one marked with a wheat sheaf, the other with 2 overlapping stars. He reached for the second, held it, then looked at Corin. May I ask? What does it mean? Corin's smile was soft as flour. Only that some paths, he said, are brighter when shared. Let your breath find that rhythm again. Inhale, warm, like a sunlit loaf. Exhale, light like rising steam. Inhale, a moment of stillness. Exhale, the peace of knowing you are held. The traveler nodded, pressed a silver coin into Corin's palm, and left without another word. But that night, long after the village slept, he would write in his journal, "There is a baker here who stamps wishes into bread, and I think one found me." When the market began to thin, and the sun tilted higher, Corin gathered his empty basket and walked slowly back to the bakery. He passed children with crumbs on their lips, elders with soft smiles, and homes that smelled gently of toasting slices. Each window flickered with warmth. Each doorstep seemed touched by something invisible, as if the loaves now eaten or resting in cloth had left more than nourishment. They had left presence. Back at the bakery, Corin untied his apron, shook flour from his sleeves, and washed his hands in lavender water.
Ouse.
The stamp went back into its drawer, still warm. The oven's embers glowed low. And above in the round window, a single cloud drifted by, shaped like a spiral. Breathe with him now. In, let yourself soften. Out, let yourself settle. There is no rush, only rhythm, and rhythm is rest. There's a quiet kind of memory that lives not in the mind, but in the hands, the weights in the fingertips, and the bend of a wrist, the dusting of flour, the rhythm of kneading. Corin's memories did not speak in voices. They spoke in textures, smells, heat, silence. And sometimes, on afternoons like this, the oven cooling and the village dozing, he would remember. His very first loaf was not perfect. The crust split oddly, the center dipped in. One side baked darker than the other. But he remembered the feel of it as if it had just happened. The soft stick of dough on his forearms. The laughter of his grandmother as he tried to copy her slow, folding movements. The nervous pause before placing it into the oven. And the sound, that soft rising crackle when it began to bake. He had waited beside the hearth. The entire time, watching the flames flicker across the stone arch like starlight through a cave, and when the loaf finally came out, he hadn't wanted to eat it. "It's mine," he said, hugging it to his chest. "Yours to give," his grandmother had replied, not unkindly. He remembered how heavy it felt, the warmth of it, the weight of effort. He remembered walking it across the village to the neighbor's doorstep, and leaving it there, barefoot and shy. He never saw who took it, never asked. But the next morning, a blue ribbon had been tied to the bakery's gate, and he knew. The gift had been received, and so had he. That ribbon was still in a drawer somewhere. Old, soft as thread, smelling faintly of rosemary smoke. And childhood breathed slowly now, as if lifting a memory from warm linen. Inhale, with the scent of old wood and baking crust. Exhale, with the sigh of an ember fading into ash. Corin didn't bake for praise. But that first blue ribbon had been the first whisper that what he gave could ripple gently through someone else's world. He had never needed more. That's what he thought of now as he sat beside the window, hands quiet, brow smudged faintly with flour. The bakery, empty of movement, was still full of meaning. Because everything in it, every peel, every stamp, every crack in the stone floor, held a story. Some whispered, some waiting, some warm. Looked toward the small clay shelf near the oven, where a line of old tools sat. One, a spoon so worn its handle was thin as reed. Another, a crooked bowl with carvings so faint they could only be seen by morning light. These were not antiques. They were ancestors. And Corin treated them as such. When he used them, he moved slowly. Not out of frailty, but respect. Was not the first to bake here, and he would not be the last. There's peace in knowing you are part of a long line, of hands that shaped, hearts that gave, souls that rose like dough under starlight. Corin didn't need to be remembered by name. He just needed his loaves to carry the feeling forward. Let your breath move now like generations. Soft, slow, sure. Inhale with legacy, exhale with rest. You are part of something kind. You always have been. The sky outside was turning to ink, not black, but deep blue, like the space between dreams. One by one, the stars blinked back into being. Each one pausing in the hush of dusk, like a candle just lit. Inside the bakery, the oven glowed again. Its warmth had never left, only shifted, waiting like breath between sentences. Corin moved slowly now. The night was his true beginning. He dusted the counter, ran his hand along the groove in the wood where generations before him had kneaded the same line again and again. The flour sack was lighter tonight. That was all right. Fewer loaves. But every one of them would matter. He poured water warmed by sunlight and stirred it into the flour, watching it drink slowly, like earth sipping rain. Salt followed, fine gray, pinched with reverence. Then the yeast, sleepy and dry at first, but ready to wake. The dough clung to his hands, cool, then warmer. It pulsed as he pressed, pushed, turned, rested like a heart forming its first thoughts. Above him, through the round window, the moon rose like a slice of silver bread. It watched. It always did. And Corin smiled as he shaped each loaf beneath its gaze. Tonight, he made only 5. 5 rounds. Each stamped with something new. A small house, winding path, a pair of clasped hands, a tiny flame, and one, just one, with a perfectly carved star. That one, he wasn't sure who it was for yet. He only knew it needed to be made. Some loaves are like that. They ask to exist before their meaning arrives. Let your breath rise with the dough. Inhales low, rich, full, exhale soft, trusting, deep. You don't need to know where you're going, only that something in you is rising. The oven opened like a sigh. Its mouth glowed with quiet promise. Corin slid the loaves in one by one, each resting in its own pocket of heat. As the crusts began to form, he sat again beside the window. Let the moonlight wrap around his shoulders like a shawl woven from sky. And as he sat, he whispered something. Not to the loaves, not to the stars, to himself. It was a small wish, not for more time, not for fame. Just for the strength to keep waking when no one called his name. Because even in silence, even in small places, the act of giving makes the world bigger. Even if no one sees it happen, he closed his eyes. Beneath them, the loaves browned gently. The stamps faded into crust, but their meanings stayed, like stars behind clouds. Still there, just resting. Let your thoughts rest too. Sink into the warmth. Sink into the knowing. There is a place for your quiet. It is enough. The loaves had finished baking. The air in the bakery was thick with warmth, spice, and the soft hiss of cooling crust. Corin used 2 hands to lift each one onto its resting cloth. The smell made even the walls feel softer, like they, too, were ready to exhale. He covered them with linen, not to hide them, but to bless them. A quiet cover for quiet miracles. Then came the final loaf, the one with the star. Still glowing faintly from the oven's light, Corin didn't wrap it. He didn't place it with the others. He simply held it, letting its heat warm the space between his palms. It felt different than the others. Not heavier, just waiting, as if it had not yet found the person it was meant for. Lantern unlit, because the moon was enough. The street was still, the square empty. Only the sound of crickets and the occasional creak of a shutter responded to his footsteps. He paused at the old well, listened, not for water, but for direction. Sometimes the night gave it freely. Other times, you had to wait. Tonight, he waited. And then, so softly it could have been breeze, he felt a tug, not on his cloak, not on his arm, on his heart. He turned left, past the smithy, the candle house, the quiet black windows of sleeping homes, until he reached a place he had never been before. It was a small cottage tucked just beyond the hill's bend, new by the looks of it, its thatch still golden, its wood still smelling of pine, and in its only window a candle burned, soft, lonely, awake. He didn't knock, just stepped up to the doorstep, gently laid the star-marked loaf on the flat stone before the door, and whispered, "May this keep your dreams company." Then he turned and walked slowly away. Behind him, he didn't hear the door open, didn't hear feet step outside, but he smiled, because that was never the point. The gift had been given. The dream had been shared. And somewhere, someone who needed to feel remembered would wake to the warmth of bread made by hands that listened. Let your thoughts walk with him now. Inhaled moonlight over thatched roofs. Exhale footsteps that leave no mark but kindness. Inhale cool night air. Exhale warm rising bread. You are safe. You are thought of. Even in silence. Back at the bakery, Corin returned the basket to its place, folded his apron, and climbed the narrow stair to the loft above. There, in a small bed of linen and wool, he lay down. And through the skylight above, stars blinked gently. He didn't count them, simply watched, till their light began to feel like a lullaby. The bed was simple. No carvings, no headboard, softened by time, just old pine beams and the weight of many peaceful nights. The mattress was filled with wool, stuffed by his grandmother's own hands, and it sighed as he sank into it, as if happy to hold him again. Single pillow, flat, cool to the cheek, a blanket, and that smelled faintly of thyme and firewood. Corin exhaled long and low, the kind of breath that tells the body, "You are finished for today." Above him, the stars moved slowly across the skylight, some twinkling, others still as pinpricks of thought. One blinked gently, then another, like eyelids closing. And soon his own began to match them. The room was quiet, but not silent. There was the creak of the old wood beams, settling as night deepened. It was the whisper of sounds were lullabies. Whined there through the narrow chimney, was a faintest scent. Someone who had spent a lifetime of two, the hush of ovens, cinnamon. And still, curled in the air from the earlier loaves. These two listening, and the heartbeat of rising bread, breathed with him now, inhaled like the soft curl of steam from a fresh cup. Exhaled like the hush of footsteps across flour-dusted floors. Inhale safe in your resting place. Exhaled by the hush of stars. In his sleep, Corin dreamed not of words, but of shapes. The round curve of a perfectly proofed loaf, the soft press of a stamp against dough. The winding path from bakery to doorstep traveled 1,000 times. But tonight, there was something new in his dream. A door, half open, and behind it, a small voice, not spoken aloud. Just a feeling, a presence, waiting. He didn't try to name it. He didn't need to. Simply stepped toward it, in his dream barefoot and light, carrying nothing but the warmth of his hands. And the moment he crossed the threshold, he felt it. The knowing that someone he had never met had already felt seen because of something he had given. Not fame, not wealth, just warmth and care, wrapped in crust. The dream stayed with him as the night deepened, and the village stilled even further. Even the owls flew softer now. Even the wind whispered slower. Let your thoughts soften too, like dough resting in a cloth-covered bowl. Inhale. Let yourself rise just a little. Sail. Let yourself fall gently back into peace. Everything needed has been done. You are enough. You can rest. The baker in his sleep turned slightly, smile ghosted across his face, and the stars shimmered on. In the hush between midnight and dawn, when even the moon begins to rest, a dream began to drift through Corin's sleep. But it wasn't like other dreams, not full of symbols or stories. This dream was soft and wide and gentle. It carried him not upward, but outward, like flowers scattered by breeze. He saw the village, but not from the street, not from the bakery window. Saw it from above, from somewhere just above the rooftops, floating slow, as if lying on a cloud woven from linen and light. Each house glowed, not brightly, but warmly. Dim flickers at hearths, a lantern on a porch, moonlight in window panes. The village asleep, yet alive. In his dream he could feel them all, the villagers he baked for each day. Their breathing, their turning in sleep. Their hearts beating slow and sure. Some clutched pillows, others blankets. One small child slept curled around a loaf, still warm from market morning. Another had tucked a crumb beneath her pillow, just to keep the scent of kindness close. Corin's dream moved like wind, silent, drifting, pausing now and then at doorways he knew by memory. He did not knock. He simply let the quiet enter and be received. No one stirred, but all felt. There was old Nara, once a seamstress, now slow of step. She'd placed her bread slice in a clay bowl, covered with a cloth. Tomorrow she'd toast it with goat cheese and thyme, but tonight she dreamt of her mother's hands kneading dough in a home long gone, and smiled in her sleep. There was Tomas, the blacksmith's boy, who rarely spoke. He had eaten 2 rolls before bed, one for hunger, one for courage. Now he dreamed he was walking a path of stars, each one lighting up beneath his bare feet. He did not speak in the dream either, but he laughed. And in the bakery loft, Corin smiled, still sleeping. Let your breath float now, like mist over thatched rooftops. Inhales soft as a lantern glow, exhales low as an old lullaby. You are held by night. You are part of its dream. The dream took Corin further now, to the fields, where the wheat would soon wake, to the orchard, where wind stirred leaves like whispers, finally, to the sea. For yes, beyond the hills, beyond the tree line, the village sat not far from quiet cliffs and the ever-waiting ocean. Corin had not seen it in years, but in his dream, it welcomed him like a forgotten friend. In the hush between midnight and dawn, when even the moon begins to rest, a dream began to drift through Corin's sleep. But it wasn't like other dreams, not full of symbols or stories. This dream was soft and wide and gentle. It carried him not upward, but outward, like flowers scattered by breeze. He saw the village, but not from the street, not from the bakery window. Saw it from above, from somewhere just above the rooftops, floating slow, as if lying on a cloud woven from linen and light. Each house glowed, not brightly, but warmly. Dim flickers at hearths, a lantern on a porch, moonlight in window panes. The village asleep, yet alive. In his dream he could feel them all, the villagers he baked for each day. Their breathing, their turning in sleep. Their hearts beating slow and sure. Some clutched pillows, others blankets. One small child slept curled around a loaf, still warm from market morning. Another had tucked a crumb beneath her pillow, just to keep the scent of kindness close. Corin's dream moved like wind, silent, drifting, pausing now and then at doorways he knew by memory. He did not knock. He simply let the quiet enter and be received. No one stirred, but all felt. There was old Nara, once a seamstress, now slow of step. She'd placed her bread slice in a clay bowl, covered with a cloth. Tomorrow she'd toast it with goat cheese and thyme. But tonight, she dreamt of her mother's hands kneading dough in a home long gone, and smiled in her sleep. There was Tomas, the blacksmith's boy, who rarely spoke. He had eaten 2 rolls before bed, one for hunger, one for courage. Now he dreamed he was walking a path of stars, each one lighting up beneath his bare feet. He did not speak in the dream either, but he laughed. And in the bakery loft, Corin smiled, still sleeping. "Let your breath float now, like mist over thatched rooftops." Inhales soft as a lantern glow, exhales low as an old lullaby. You are held by night, you are part of its dream. The dream took Corin further now, to the fields, where the wheat would soon wake, to the orchard, where wind stirred leaves like whispers, finally, to the sea. For yes, beyond the hills, beyond the tree line, the village sat not far from quiet cliffs and the ever-waiting ocean. Corin had not seen it in years, but in his dream, it welcomed him like a forgotten friend. The deepest part of night isn't black, it's silver blue. It's like water beneath moonlight, like memory. And in that hour, when the village slept its softest, the dream around Corin began to shift, no longer floating, now walking. His bare feet touched stone, cool from the air, but warm beneath somehow. As though memory itself had left heat behind. He found himself in the bakery. Right! But not quite. It was his oven, his shelves, his drawer of stamps. Yet everything shimmered faintly, as if lit from within, and everywhere loaves, loaves of every kind. Some from yesterday, some from decades ago. Some he had never even made, and each one glowed softly. He picked one up, stamped with a crescent, its crust warm, its scent timeless. He pressed it to his chest, and in a whisper of knowing, he saw the face of the man he had once given it to, a traveler years ago, who had taken the bread in silence and left a smooth riverstone in return. Corin hadn't thought of him since, but now in the dream he remembered everything, and so did the loaf. Another, a braid of honey dough marked with the tree of kinship, and a vision came, a wedding day. 2 hands breaking the bread together under a shared cloak. He hadn't been invited. He had only sent the bread. And yet the dream let him see how deeply it had been felt. He moved through them slowly, a library not of words, but of nourishment. Each loaf a letter, each crust a page. He was surrounded by volumes of quiet kindness, and none had been forgotten. Not by the dream. Not by the lives they had touched. Let your breath deepen now. Inhale like walking among memory. Exhale like touching something you didn't know remembered you. You were part of the story, even when your name is never spoken. You matter, even when you are quiet. At the center of the room was a single table. Upon it sat a round loaf, unmarked, still rising, alive. It pulsed, as if breathing. And Corin knew this one had not been given yet. This loaf was for tomorrow, or perhaps a day beyond that. But its meaning was already forming. Some gifts arrive before the moment, and some hearts need time to be ready. He didn't touch it. He only bowed slightly, as if before a great truth. Then the dream began to fold, not end, but soften, like dough at its final rise. The loaves faded gently. The shimmer in the air dimmed, and the bakery returned. To its resting stillness, Corin stirred in bed. Not awake, not quite, but his breathing shifted. And in the space between waking and dreaming, he whispered thank you to no one. And to everyone, let your breath join his. Inhale like memory wrapped in cloth. Exhale like stories cooling on a wooden rack. You are surrounded by meaning, even now, even here. Before the rooster, before the bell, before even the fire stirs, there is a hush, a pre-dawn moment when the world listens. And this morning the hush lingered a little longer. Corin opened his eyes slowly, his breath still matching the rhythm of sleep. He didn't sit up right away, just let the ceiling come into focus. The curved wooden beams above him, etched by candle smoke and time. The sky outside the window was the softest shade of indigo. That whisper of blue, just before the first gold arrives. He inhaled, and there it was again. The faint scent of cooling bread, still laced with memory, still laced with dream. He hadn't dreamed that whole vision, had he? the glowing loaves, the table with the rising round. He closed his eyes again, listened inward, and though the dream had passed, its warmth remained. It's like the feel of a blanket that still holds the shape of your sleep. Downstairs, the bakery waited. But it didn't rush him. It never did. Corin believed that the oven, like bread, liked to be greeted gently. So he arose, stretched slow, and stepped onto the wooden floor barefoot. His heel found a patch of flour left from the night before. He smiled. Some people cleaned every trace. Corin let the flour stay, not out of laziness, but out of reverence. It was not mess. It was memory. Every step dusted white was a reminder that something nourishing had happened here. He lit the first lantern. Not for light. The sky was beginning to pale, but for warmth. The flicker spread, casting soft shadows over the workbench, the shelves, and the resting loaves. Ah, why yes, the loaves. He uncovered them, one by one, checking their crusts with the back of his knuckles. Still firm, still fragrant, still singing their quiet songs of fire and flour. And at the end of the row, star-marked loaf was missing. He paused, then remembered. The doorstep, the cottage, the flickering candle in the window. And a warmth bloomed in his chest, even brighter than the lantern. Let your breath rise with the morning. Inhale like steam rising from an oven door. Exhale like sun pouring through old glass. You have come far. You are just where you need to be, Corin began again. Not from scratch, but from the middle. For every morning was a continuation of something sacred. The starter, the flour, the rhythm. He poured water slowly as though waking it. The flour followed, soft as snowfall. And then the gentle press of his palms. He did not hum. But the silence had music. The sound of kneading. The creak of floorboards. The faint chirp of the first bird. And his breathing, even steady, like the rhythm of a resting heart. Outside, the village would soon stir. But for now, he was alone in the space where dreams became breakfast, where sleep met hunger, where the soul touched the crust of another day. He looked to the round window. The sky was no longer blue, it was golden. One beam stretched across the room and landed on his hands. He paused, let the light soak into his skin, smiled. The first knock came gently, not a demand. Just a hello from someone who couldn't say it out loud. Corin glanced at the door as he brushed flour from his apron. He didn't rush. Oh, he never rushed mornings. He placed one hand on the wooden counter, feeling the warmth from the rising dough, and walked to the door. Outside stood Marta, her scarf wrapped twice around her shoulders, a basket hanging from her arm. She had 3 little ones, one teething, one growing too fast, one who liked to feed crusts to the crows. Corin said nothing. He simply held out a cloth-wrapped loaf and a small jar of spiced honey. She smiled with her eyes, tucked it into her basket, and nodded once. A wordless thank you passed between them. She turned away, shuffling back down the cobbled path, her shawl catching morning light like wings. The next visitor was a boy barefoot. He didn't knock, just peeked inside, his cheeks already smudged with soot from the chimney sweep's alley. Corin handed him a roll, still warm, stuffed with soft apple and sage. The boy bit it on the spot, eyes closing, and ran off laughing. Corin smiled as he swept the counter again. This was how he liked it. No coin, no barter, just exchange. Bread for breath, warmth for wonder, loaves for the living, crumbs for the birds. Speaking of which, a small flock gathered at the sill. Fat little things, waiting for their share. Corin scattered pieces of yesterday's crust, and the birds flitted down like feathery dancers, chirping their approval as if he were the morning's conductor. Let your breath match their wings. Inhale like feathers settling on windowsills. Exhale like old crumbs tumbling from a soft palm. Let go of what's no longer needed. What remains will nourish someone. The village was fully awake now. Footsteps passed by. Children's laughter echoed off stone. Someone wheeled a creaky cart past the square, but inside the bakery, time moved slow. It's measured not by clocks, but by rising, by resting, by giving. Corin returned to the table, dusting it once more with flour. Today he would try a new blend. Barley with rosewater. He dreamed of it once, and dreams often knew what the day needed before the day did. The first round began to take shape beneath his hands. Soft, quiet folds. A twist at the crown, marked like the spiral of a sleeping snail. He left it to rest, then stepped outside. The sun was warm now, but the air still held the kiss of dew. He sat on the bench near the door, cracked a heel of fresh bread, and watched as the birds gathered again. I sat near his foot. Black-eyed bold, Corin leaned forward. "This one," he whispered, breaking off a soft bit of crust, was stamped with a flame. He offered it. The bird tilted its head, then hopped forward and took it gently. Then it flew, carrying flame crust skyward. He chuckled softly. "Even bread meant for earth sometimes touch the heavens. Let your breath soften now. Inhale like warmth rising from the hearthstone. Exhale like old stories spoken beneath breath. You are part of the mornings, even when you haven't spoken a word." The sun had fully risen. Its light streamed across the bakery floor, pooling in golden rectangles, lighting up the fine flour that floated in the air like drifting stardust. Corin stood at the counter, hands dusted pale, a final round of dough in his palms. It was the last loaf of the morning. He shaped it slowly, intentionally, not because he was tired, but because he wanted it to carry everything he could no longer say. To its fold, he tucked a whisper of honey, a pinch of fennel, and a small curled clove that reminded him of his father's spice chest. Then came the stamp. Not a symbol of flame or tree or star, but a spiral. Open at the center, unfinished. Not a mark of ending, but one of continuation. A message for anyone who held it. You are part of something that never really stops. He let it rise. Watched the dough lift itself with slow breath. And then he placed it in the oven, where the flames licked it gently, as if they too understood this was more than bread. Outside, the village pulsed with daytime rhythm. A child cried. A horse clopped by. A laugh rang out from the square. But inside was still and sacred. He sat beside the hearth with a cup of warm barley milk, letting the scent of the final loaf wrap around him like a shawl, and as the crust browned, he let his thoughts drift to loaves given, 2 dreams held, to the star-marked bread on a stranger's doorstep. He didn't know who had eaten it. He didn't need to. Some kindnesses are given not to be remembered but simply to be. Let your breath settle with him. Inhale like scent curling from warm crust. Exhale like morning slipping gently into noon. You are enough, even when you do not see the result of your giving. The oven gave a soft crack, the sound of crust setting. The loaf was done. Corin rose slowly, lifted it in both hands, felt its weight. It was perfect. And yet it wasn't for anyone in particular. Not today, maybe not ever. But still, it would be made. And that was enough. He placed it on the sill to cool, just beside the small bunch of dried lavender tied with twine, and sat again, not to work, but to be. The day would go on. Loaves would rise. Evening would fall. The bell would ring. And in the silence after, he would rest again, as would the village, as would the stars. And if someone, walking home at dusk, looked up and saw one glowing, just one, and wondered if it was meant for them, it might be. Let your breath be like that star. Inhale, present and glowing. Exhale, gentle and distant, but real. Sleep will come again, and dreams will return. And someone